According to the myths and legends of the Eldari, the goddess of fate, Morai Heg, desired the knowledge that flowed within her very blood. To this end, Morai Heg convinced the god of war, Kayla Mencha Kane, into severing her hand at the wrist, allowing the goddess to drink deep of the vitae that surged from her wound, and as a result would gain enlightenment. The god of the forge, Vol, would then take Morai Heg's lifeless hand and would painstakingly craft each of the goddess's fingers into great and deadly weapons. These weapons would become known to the Eldari as the Croneswords, and are said to grant their wielders the power over life and death itself. Despite being known as the Croneswords, they have been shown to take the forms of other kind of weaponry, including that of spears. With the gestating form of Ynnead, the nascent god of the dead, slowly growing greater in power, the leader of the Inari, Yvraine, believes that Ynnead can be awakened using the power of the Croneswords, as opposed to condemning the entirety of the Eldari species to extinction, a method known as the Seventh Way. To this end, Yvraine and her forces have embarked on a quest to locate these weapons, and so far have located 4 of the 5 Croneswords. Kavir, the Sword of Sorrows, which can turn its victims to ash. The Asuvar, Sword of Silent Screams, which feeds upon the life essence of its victims. The Vilifzar, the Sword of Souls, largest of the Croneswords. And finally, the Spear of Twilight, which can burn souls to nothingness, and would eventually alter its form to that of a sword after its true identity was exposed. So what could be the 5th Cronesword? There are certainly many unique weapons within the galaxy with exceptional properties that could very well mark them out as being one of these legendary blades. One of these is the Death Sword of Cain, which was originally located upon the world of Belial IV. This sword, also known as the Death Blade, was a massive sword as tall as a man, and forged from a black crystalline substance, etched with runes and gemstones. The Death Sword also had the ability to drain the life from those it struck, making flesh burn and flake away like ash, leaving only skeletal remains in its wake. So potent was this blade, that even demonic entities could be slain by such a weapon. The sword feeds upon souls, and as such it does certainly appear, at least initially, to be one of the Croneswords. The Death Sword certainly shares similar characteristics with the Croneswords, being able to absorb the life force of any who become struck by it, as well as turning their bodies to ash. Not only that, but the Death Sword also resided upon the world of Belial IV, where the Vilifzar was also known to be located. When the Inari landed upon the world to recover the Vilifzar, they believed to feel the presence of 2 Croneswords, which would suggest that the Death Sword could very well have been the last of these relics. However, despite fulfilling the apparent criteria of being a Cronesword, it seems unlikely that the Death Sword is the final Cronesword, for one major reason. It was forged by the Eldari themselves, and not by the smith god, Vol. The novel Farseer details events leading to the creation of the Death Sword, which took place prior to the fall of the ancient Eldari Empire. The sword was forged by the hands of those seers who had the foresight to try and defend themselves against their awakening great enemy, the Chaos God Slaanesh.
Some turned their faces from the dark and prepared to flee their worlds in great arcs, but most stayed and so were doomed. Others, the priests who had built this temple, who also saw a gathering doom, remained and tried to preach against the corruption. When this failed, they retired to its depths to forge a weapon against what was to come. Using energies of awesome power, they forged a sword that was not a sword, but a captured echo of the death force of the universe, bound into the shape of a blade. Then they waited for their doom to come upon them.
Because of this, it seems that the Ynnead may have indeed sensed the residual energies of the Death Sword upon the world, and may have simply mistaken the Death Sword for a Cronesword due to its immense power. In addition, if the final Cronesword was indeed upon the surface of Belial 4, then the Ynnead would have, at some point in time, returned to the world in order to claim it. Admittedly, the forces of the Ynnead did barely manage to escape from a horde of demonic creatures after acquiring the Vilif Tsar, and may seem unwilling to return to the world. But seeing as how the Croneswords allegedly hold the key to the salvation of the Eldari, it seems logical that they would have attempted to launch an all-out assault to obtain this artifact at any cost. Perhaps through a combined assault from the Craft Worlds, Corsair fleets, and the Dark Realm of Camorra in this regard. But even if the Ynnead did return to the world to try and find the Death Sword, they wouldn't be able to locate it, as the weapon was taken off-world by the rogue trader Janus Dark and the Farseer Auric Stormcloud. So if the last Cronesword isn't the Death Sword of Cain, then what else could it be? As mentioned earlier, the Cronesword doesn't necessarily have to take the form of a sword, as demonstrated with the Spear of Twilight. So perhaps the final Cronesword is in fact another spear. More specifically, the Pale Spear. The Pale Spear was the signature melee weapon of Alfarius, the Primarch of the Alpha Legion. This spear was said to be a piece of incredibly ancient Xenos technology, and whenever the blade tore into flesh, it would dissolve the soft tissue into plumes of oily smoke, leaving vast gaping and bloodless wounds. The spear could also bypass any form of armour, leaving no viable defence from the spear's onslaught. While at first glance the Pale Spear could very well be a candidate for the final Cronesword, there is some doubt in this regard. This comes from another unique trait of the weapon, where the spear can seemingly phase in and out of the material universe. Because of this phasing ability, it's possible that the Pale Spear is in actuality a piece of technology that was constructed by the ancient race known as the Necrontyr, who were known to incorporate phase technology into many of their creations. The fact that the Pale Spear's forging is said to predate the Eldari themselves would also seemingly support the notion that this weapon is in fact of Necron origin as opposed to being one of the Croneswords. Another possible identity of the final Cronesword could be the weapon known as the Last Breath. This weapon is an ancient relic within Drukhari society, and is currently wielded by the Archon of the Shadowed Thorns Cabal, Selene Morn. The sword itself is able to drain its victims of their strength, even to the point that their blows will deal no harm to the wielder of the sword, rendering them completely helpless. Little else is known about the Last Breath, and the fact that it drains its victims of their strength makes it seem, at least from a preliminary standpoint, that it could very well tie into the possibility of the blade being a Cronesword. What makes this unlikely, however, is that the Last Breath seems to be a weapon forged with the intention of torture instead of killing. As such, given how the Last Breath itself doesn't have any other traits associated with the Croneswords, such as burning a victim's soul, the possibility of it being a Cronesword is slim. In addition, given the fact that the last breath is a Drukhari weapon, if it were a Cronesword, then surely its true heritage would have been revealed by this point in time. This leaves one more potential candidate towards the identity of the last Cronesword, the Dawnblade. The Dawnblade is the signature weapon used by the Tau commander Chasseur Violachova Montier, known more commonly as Commander Farsight to Imperial forces. The blade is incredibly powerful, flickering with an unknown energy that allows it to slice through stone and steel alike as if it were paper. In addition, the blade absorbs the life force of those it slays, adding the remainder of the victim's natural lifespan to that of the wielder. Because of these properties, it has allowed Farsight to live for well over 300 years, far longer than the average lifespan of the Tau, which is normally shorter than that of unaugmented humans. The Dawnblade itself was recovered from a set of ancient ruins upon the world of Arthas Moloch, where it rested within the hands of a great statue. What race the statue depicted is not entirely clear, only that it was ancient in its construction, which could possibly point towards it having potential Eldari origins. The novel Farsight Crisis of Faith describes Farsight's first encounter with the Dawnblade with the following passage.
Around the statue's neck was a metallic amulet, hexagrammatic in shape, glinting in the gloom against the alabaster of its torso. The Molochite giant recoiled from the statue as if stung. In the statue's right hand was a sword so large and heavy it would have taken 2 strong Tau to lift it. Somehow, the blade had not been dulled by the dust of eons.
Given the Dawnblade's lifespan extending abilities, combined with the fact that it was found within ancient ruins, would make it plausible to assume that this could very well be the final Cronesword. The fact that the aforementioned Molochite giant, which in actuality was a bloodthirster of Khorne, recoiled from the statue that bore the sword makes it clear that this was a weapon that even demons feared. And what else could a demon fear than a weapon forged by a god? Now, admittedly, the Dawnblade doesn't appear to be Eldari in its construction, appearing to be more Tau or Necrontyr in aesthetic. But that being said, as stated earlier, the Croneswords are known to take many different forms, and will change to their true form upon the confirmation of their true identity. If the Dawnblade is the final Cronesword, then it would lead to an interesting development between the Tau and the Ynnead. Would the Ynnead seek to kill Farsight to take the Dawnblade from him, or would they allow Farsight to join them, possibly seeing Farsight's encounter with the Dawnblade as being somehow preordained? Regardless, either possibility is fascinating to consider. What do you think the final Cronesword is? Leave a comment below, and thanks for watching.